Despite Sakura's absence, as well as not seeing anybody besides Jiraiya for months at a time, and the occasional lecture by Danzo, Naruko found herself enjoying herself during her training trip. She liked training. It wasn't just some work she did to get a worthwhile result. She enjoyed the process itself, using, refining and finding new ways to use her chakra, pushing her body past its limits. And that moment where you sit down and rest after completely exhausting yourself. She loved it all, and would have continued to do it just as a hobby even if it wasn't her profession. That had always been something that differentiated herself from both Sakura and Ino, for whom training was just something they had to do. Jiraiya's preferred method of teaching was very much like Asuma's, with a kind of hands-off approach and letting her figure things out herself. Especially after Jiraiya discovered she was good at figuring things out herself. He was there when she needed him, and was always ready to offer constructive feedback or a spar, but beyond that he tended to leave her alone. Jiraiya informed her this was also how he handled Minato, and that she was very much like him as a student. Once that kind of comparison would have made her all giddy, and there was still a little of that. But after the things Danzo said about him, things Jiraiya couldn't say were lies, her feelings on her father were starting to get complicated. However, there was one aspect of her training that Naruko was truly dreading. "Have you had any luck with drawing upon the Kyuubi's power?" Jiraiya asked her one evening. Naruko hadn't attempted that in a long time. It was dangerous and she honestly didn't see the point. "The Kyuubi made it clear he'll never lift a finger to help me." Jiraiya sighed. "Danzo and I disagree on many a thing, but he is right that you'll need that power before the end. You're progressing remarkably fast, and in time you may end up surpassing your father even without the Kyuubi's power. But I'll be honest, at this rate that's not gonna happen in 3 years' time." "And what would you have me do? I can't do this without the fox's help, and he's not going to." "And when was the last time you tried?" "And even if he does help me, how could I ever trust him?" Naruko said, ignoring his question. "Even if he'll allow me unrestricted access to his power, I'll constantly need to be looking for a dagger in my back. He'd be as much of a danger to me as the Akatsuki." "I hear you, Naruko, but Minato wouldn't have sealed the fox into you if he didn't think you could handle it. You can't give up." Naruko was silent as he tried to come up with some kind of solution. "What about the other Jinchuriki? Maybe I could ask them for advice. The Hokage said that the cloud had 2 Jinchuriki who were in complete control." Jiraiya cringed. "That is true, but trying to contact either of them at this point would be problematic. Things between the villages are a little tense, and Danzo would lose his shit if I allow you near the cloud." "And do you actually care what Lord Danzo thinks?" Naruko asked. She knew Jiraiya and the Hokage weren't exactly on the same page, to put it mildly. "No, not really," Jiraiya said with a wry smile. "But he does have a point here. Do you know what caused your mother and father to finally start dating?" Naruko was always eager to learn more about her parents, so that immediately caught her attention. "No?" "It was after Minato saved your mom from being abducted by Cloud Ninja. At the age of 14, Minato defeated 3 Anbu Cloud Ninja, with very little effort if Kushina's retelling was to be believed. Minato had had a crush on your mother for a long time, but after that Kushina started to reciprocate." Jiraiya noticed that Naruko had a dreamy look as she tried to picture it. It was all very romantic in her imagination. "But the point of this story is that the cloud has a history of trying to steal Konoha's Jinchuriki. Forget Danzo. I'm not comfortable letting you near them at this stage." "If not the cloud, then someone else. Is there any Jinchuriki it would be safe to approach? Even ignoring my own training, I honestly would like to get to just know some of them. The only other I've ever encountered was Gaara, and they can't all be that bad." Jiraiya decided to go over all the Jinchuriki. "Besides you, Gaara, and the 2 from the cloud, there are 5 others. The Mist had 2, but one is a wandering rogue ninja and the other was the recently dethroned and killed Mizukage. We could try to find the missing one, but the Mist is undoubtedly looking for him, and if they can't find him, I don't think we'll have any better luck." I've also never heard anything about him mastering his tail beast with any great proficiency, so I don't know how much help he'd be. The stone has two, with one of them spending most of his time out of the village. Roshi, I think his name was. Honestly, if we're trying to just meet one of them alone, he might be our best bet. By all accounts, he's still loyal to the stone, despite spending most of his time out of the village. But if I'm with you, I'm positive we could at least escape if he turns out to be hostile. The one inside of the hidden stone is off limits for the same reason those of the clouds are off limits. Then there is one other from the hidden waterfall, the only one not from the Big Five. She's the only other Jinchuriki who's from you and Gaara's generation. But that last one immediately caught Naruko's attention due to sounding the most similar to herself. I choose her! I thought you might, but meeting her might still be a problem. All the villagers guard their Jinchuriki jealously, and they are wary of letting any foreign ninja near them. But we would never do anything bad like that. If we tried this a couple of years earlier, we might have had more luck. But our current Hokage does have a certain reputation. That he'd jump at the chance for Konoha to gain a second tail beast, and so they are unlikely to let us near the Jinchuriki from Waterfall. For the same reason, I'm reluctant to let you near the cloud. Jiraiya suddenly looked tired. There's just way too much distrust between all the villages, and it isn't looking to get any better. Not if we just give up, no? Naruko said. Jiraiya smiled. For all his talk of wanting to diminish the hate in the world, decades without any progress had long since worn away at his enthusiasm. Many still remember the last Great War, and many grudges remain. But you're trying to work past that, right? Trying, but it isn't easy. Well, this would be a great place to start by reaching out, isn't it? I could help. You certainly could. Like, how about we go to the hidden sand and ask this Gaara for his experience? Naruko's expression darkened. I hear he's no longer as bloodthirsty as he once was. He's still a murderer. Jiraiya laughed. We're all murderers. I'm certainly no exception. Like I said, working past grudges isn't easy. If I can't even convince you, my own student, how could I ever convince anyone else? There is much hate, fear and distrust between the villages. Most of it based on personal hurts and tragedy, like yours. How can you expect to work past other people's hate when you can't get past your own? Naruko had trouble meeting Jiraiya's eyes. Maybe I could just send some letters? Including to Gaara? No. Jiraiya managed to hide his disappointment. There's little harm in that. Danzo might care that you're essentially informing the other villages of your own lack of control, but I don't. Write your letters, and I'll deliver the ones I can. And so Naruko ended up writing a total of 4 letters. One meant for the cloud, for both of their Jinchuriki, Mie and Yukito, since they were roughly at the same location. A second letter meant for Roshi, and a third for HANE, both of the stone. And a fourth and slightly more personal and open letter for Fu of the Hidden Waterfall. From HANE she didn't get a response. Or well, she got a response, but it wasn't from HANE. Instead she got a reply back from none other than the Tsuchikage himself, accusing her of trying to steal village secrets and that he saw right through her. Roshi's reply was a little friendlier, if just as unhelpful. He admitted that his seal was designed to slowly acclimate his body to the Four Tails' chakra, but that he didn't get along with his bijou. In other words, he wasn't a perfect Jinchuriki, and didn't know how to become one. He just had lava release and an increased chakra capacity, which didn't seem to require his bijou's cooperation. Naruko had admitted in her letter that she already got some mild regenerative powers and an increased chakra capacity just from holding the Nine-Tails, which the QB himself didn't seem to be able to take away from her. Roshi told her to be content with those boons and focus on her own skills, and not rely on borrowed power more than necessary. The letter from the cloud was much more helpful. Dear Uzumaki Naruko. First off, let me just say that this is the second draft of our letter. The first version was authored by B, and though the situation between our villages may be tense, even I'm not cruel enough to subject an innocent girl to B's attempts at rhyming. Second, I need to disclaim that this letter was only sent with the approval of the Raikage. As to your request for advice, let me just say that any kind of effort will be difficult without the Nine-Tails' cooperation. B and I asked Gyoki and Matatabi after the Nine-Tails, and he does sound like a difficult one to deal with. Matatabi and Gyoki are the real names of the 2 and 8 tails. The Nine-Tails undoubtedly has a real name too, but we don't know what it is. We were told it wasn't their secret to tell. Though asking the QB yourself can't hurt. The most optimal path for the Jinchuriki is always to cooperate with the Bijou. You said that he betrayed you before, which makes that risky, as you undoubtedly know. We cannot tell you whether cooperation is possible, only that it is desirable. Maybe you can offer the QB something he wants. Some basic courtesy can also go a long way. If not, there is one other method. Attached to this letter is a map towards a location called the Falls of Truth. There you will encounter trials that will test the core of your being. Only those completely pure of heart can pass. If you succeed, you can pass towards the Tail Beast Temple. There you can attempt to forcefully take the chakra from the QB. If you have even a sliver of hidden darkness within you though, you'll die, and the QB will break free. I suspect that this is the reason the Raikage is okay with me disclosing this information to you. He suspects and likely hopes that you'll die in the attempt. Please don't take this personally. Him hoping you'll die is merely a sign that he respects you. I myself do not recommend forcefully taking your Bijou's chakra. Maybe that is because I cannot imagine forcibly taking Matatabi's chakra from her. She's my partner. But I cannot judge your situation with the QB. If he truly cannot be anything but your enemy, well, it is up to you. Know that you can be a worthwhile kunoichi even without obtaining your Bijou's full power. But again, the choice is yours. Whatever you decide, from 2 senior Jinchurikis to their junior, we wish you luck. Kind regards, Yukito Ni and Killer B. Fu's letter wasn't as helpful, but it was nice in a whole different way. First of all, the margin of the letter was covered in simplistically drawn flowers. Howdy! It was wonderful to hear from you. I've never met another Jinchuriki and I'm always looking for new friends. Smile emoji. You sure we can't meet in person? Shibuki is always reluctant to let me out of the village, but surely something can be arranged. Maybe if we both perform in the tuning exams. I've heard conflicting reports about where the next one will be held. It was supposed to be the Sand's turn, but I've heard nothing. Sad face emoji. As for your problem with the Nine-Tails, well, I asked Chome, that's the 7 tails, and she tells me the QB can be a bit of a hassle to deal with. He's the most powerful and has pride to match. Must be difficult. Chome calls herself the lucky number 7, since any Jinchuriki that gets her is incredibly lucky. And I am. She's really helpful, and she's probably my best friend. I'm not making you jealous, am I? That's totally not what I'm going for here. Look on the bright side. I mean, if you succeed, you'd theoretically be the most powerful of all of us. High risks, high rewards. I get that the Nine-Tails betrayed you, but how did the 2 of you work before then? Did you try to make friends before? Even if you don't get anything out of it, it never hurts to try. Because having friends is awesome. Have I mentioned yet that I'd want to be friends? I know we are supposed to distrust each other, but I don't really feel like doing that. Please write back soon. Love, Fu. At the bottom, next to the goodbye, Fu had drawn a colored sketch of herself making a V peace sign. Do I have a twin and did we somehow get separated at birth? Naruko thought after finishing that last letter. Are you sure we can't somehow arrange a meeting? Naruko asked Jiraiya. Some of them sound like really wonderful people. I will make inquiries, Jiraiya said. Especially with Waterfall. I'll try extra hard with Waterfall, Jiraiya promised. But did you get any useful advice? Naruko shared her letters. As risky as it sounds, that Fall of Truth sounds like the best option. I'd like to try if I can't get through to the fox first, Naruko said. That sounds even more risky, What if he feigns friendship again only to stab you in the back later? I'll be careful, Naruko said. The main reason she wanted to try this first was that she suspected she'd fail whatever test she'd find at the Falls of Truth. As justified as she felt in her hatred towards Gaara, she suspected that the Falls of Truth wouldn't agree with her on that. If she was to be pure of heart, she'd need to let that go, and Naruko didn't think she'd be capable of that. After a day of gathering her thoughts, thinking of things she could say, Naruko decided to face the Nine-Tails again for the first time in months. She sat down cross-legged in the grass to meditate. Jiraiya was close by, ready to step in if something went wrong. Unlike last time, where she worked up her emotions to draw the fox's attention and he had basically invited her in, this time she managed to enter the mindscape of the seal herself. The QB still looked large and intimidating, but he also looked bored. Naruko took a steadying breath and said, "Let's try this again, shall we? My name is Naruko Uzumaki. What's your name?" The QB scoffed and Naruko's hair waved from the resulting winds.
"To you, QB will suffice."
"That isn't your name."
"It is not, and I will not give it."
Well, we are off to a wonderful start, Naruko thought. "I wanted to try and talk to you again."
"I know. I see and hear what you see and hear, so I knew you were coming and why. I could have tried to keep you out, I suppose, but I wanted to see this disaster unfold."
Naruko sighed. "Just what would I need to do to gain your respect?"
"Free me,"
the QB said immediately. "That would kill me."
"I know, but I promise I'd remember you as the most noble of all humans henceforth."
"Well, that isn't happening."
"I know."
"But it doesn't mean we have to be enemies. I know that some of the other Bijus are friendly with their hosts." The QB sneered at this.
"Yes, they have given up."
"They have decided that having a friend is better than being alone. No matter how different you are from us, nobody likes to be alone. Am I wrong?"
"I have always been alone."
"Then as someone who remembers what that's like, I promise you, the alternative is better."
"Still no. And let's be honest here. You don't really want to get to know me. You're here only in the hopes of being able to use my power. Being alone is preferable to such a fake friendship."
That, Naruko admitted, was a fair point. She probably wouldn't be here if she wasn't looking to become a perfect Jinchuriki. Even if they did become friends, there would always be a black shadow over their bond. It was hard to blame the QB for being skeptical. However, she still had other cards to play. "Then what if I gave you something in return? Maybe I could make this cage more comfortable. Or I could let you experience the world by creating a clone that you can pilot." Naruko wasn't sure she could pull off any of those things. But if that was the price the QB demanded, she'd look into it.
"No."
"Would you rather the Akatsuki get their hands on you? If I fail, that is what will happen."
"To be held captive by them or by you? Why should the difference matter to me?"
"I'd say that they were evil, but I suppose you wouldn't care about that, would you?" Naruko said, starting to feel like this was a lost cause. The QB sighed, and something in his attitude seemed to shift.
"In all honesty, I can make a few guesses as to what the Akatsuki wants to do with me. And some of those things wouldn't end particularly well for me."
"You see, we have a common goal." The QB sighed again, and lowered his head to the floor so they were as close to eye level as it was possible for them to be.
"You and I can never work together. But, though you are human, I can tell you're not quite as bad as most. So I will do you the courtesy of explaining myself."
Naruko blinked. This was different from the obstinate hostility thus far.
"I've always disliked humans. You took my father's teachings of ninju and perverted it. But that was more abstract as it had little to do with me. But 65 years ago, your first Hokage captured me and my brethren and distributed us amongst the hidden villages like prizes. Ever since then, we have been seen as tools and handed over from generation to generation like some kind of heirloom. Some of my brethren have given up on the idea of ever being free, and have thusly started to act less hostile towards their jailers. After all, if a bijou breaks free, that kills the host. So if we are to see our jailers as anything but enemies, that is the same as giving up. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you accept the destiny your captors forced on you, give up on the idea of freedom, and offer a hand in friendship? Or would you never submit and continue to struggle against your chains, no matter how long it takes?
I don't know, Naruko admitted honestly. But I wouldn't hate the Jinchuriki. After all, I didn't choose this either.
That doesn't change the fact that you're all that stands between me and freedom. But there is more. 15 years ago, I finally saw a real chance at freedom. The seal had broken, and I could taste the outside air for the first time in 50 years. My only obstacle was your father.
Hey, don't pretend like freedom was all you were after. I saw the memories. Even after you broke free from the masked man's control, you continued to attack Konoha. Of course my dad would stop you.
That's fair. I wanted some form of retribution against those who wronged me. I often wondered what would have happened if I had simply decided to run, whether they'd let me. I suppose we'll never know. What I do know is that your father didn't need to seal me into you. There were plenty of other options. Kushina was already dying, but she could have resealed me back into herself and taken me with her, and I'd have been forced to reform. That way your father would still be alive. Or Minato could have teleported me to some place in the middle of nowhere, and again he'd still be alive to take care of you. Maybe if he'd done that, your mother could even have been saved. I thought that surely they'd choose to live, choose to stay with you and each other. But no, not even the love of a parent for their child was greater than man's desire to keep me forever trapped, a resource to be used.
That's a lie! You left them no choice! Naruko yelled. She had to believe that. The Kyuubi laughed.
The beauty of it is that I don't have to lie. I may hate your father, but I do not deny his power. Maybe you could even have outright bested me in combat and dealt with me that way. Just ask Jiraiya. He knew what kind of legend he was. He chose the one thing that would keep me forever trapped. He wanted it more than his own life, more than your mother's life, more than your happiness. No doubt he thought that you could one day master my power and use it to serve your village.
But Minato wouldn't have sealed the fox into you if he didn't think you could handle it. Naruko remembered Jiraiya saying. All that matters is that he did his duty. She remembered Danzo saying.
Do you see now? Every instance where you or your village can benefit from my captivity proves that your father's choice to keep me trapped was correct. It proves that Hashirama's choice to see us as tools and bargaining chips was correct.
The Kyuubi rose up to tower over her again.
And I will damn myself to eternal oblivion before I allow that to happen. It may be that I will never escape my captivity, but at least I can make it so you and your ilk aren't rewarded for it.
Naruko didn't know what to say. Now that he had explained his point of view, she found it hard to blame him for it. She left after that, feeling unsure of how to proceed. The more she thought about it, the more that she saw that in the struggle between the Kyuubi and herself, it was the Kyuubi whose cause was the more righteous one. And wasn't that a sobering thought? It was difficult to reconcile that idea with the memory of the Kyuubi nearly eating her and destroying almost everything she cared about. In the end, she decided that she couldn't proceed anymore down this path. There were still plenty of other ways to become strong without the Kyuubi, So the next time she was in Konoha, she went to inform the Hokage of her decision. Of course, by now she knew Danzo well enough to know that he wouldn't be sympathizing with her motivations. So she simply told him that she couldn't get the Kyuubi's cooperation, and that mastering the power was impossible without it. I admit to some disappointment, but you being able to master the Kyuubi's power on your own was always a long shot. I swear I will become strong enough on my own to rival any other potential Jinchuriki, Naruko said, suspecting that that was what he really cared about. Continuing to explore other options is a good thing, but it's too soon to give up on the Kyuubi. But as I said, I need the Kyuubi's cooperation and he won't give it. The only other way would be to Falls of Truth, and I don't think that would work. I don't either. The fact that it was suggested by the Cloud makes such a method suspect. But I had something else in mind. Danzo stood up. Follow me. Naruko did so and she was led to a remote outside training ground. Sit down, Danzo ordered, and she did, and Danzo sat down in front of her in the grass. Try to relax, he said, and grabbed the bandages over his right eye. He ripped them off and Naruko saw a brief flash of red before finding herself in front of the Kyuubi's cage. What's this? Naruko said, feeling disoriented. Plan B, Danzo said next to her. Naruko jumped in surprise. She didn't think anybody could follow her into this seal. Hello, Kyuubi, Danzo said.
If there was ever an example to justify my hatred of humans,
the Kyuubi said.
Begone, Fifth Hokage. I have nothing to say to you.
You don't need to say anything, Danzo said and stepped forward, between the metal bars and into the Kyuubi's cage. The move surprised even the Kyuubi, but after that moment's surprise, he lunged forward, intending to skewer the Hokage. Naruko followed Danzo into the cage in an attempt to save him, but she needn't have bothered. Before the Kyuubi could reach Danzo, he jerked back and roared. The Kyuubi clawed at his own face and jerked wildly about. Both Naruko and Danzo were forced to jump over the sweeping tail. It was clearly not meant as an attack, but simply the result of erratic movements. Then the movement stopped, and the Kyuubi stood completely still, almost unnaturally so. Naruko saw that the Kyuubi's slit pupils had been replaced by 2 spinning Sharingan. Sit, Danzo commanded, and like an obedient dog, the Kyuubi did so. What just happened? Naruko asked. Just like Kakashi Hatake, I'm also in possession of a Sharingan of a deceased Uchiha. Though I dare say I mastered mine to a greater level. This is also an S-class secret, so don't tell anybody about it. I hoped that my prowess with the Sharingan would be able to control the Kyuubi, and it seems I was correct. And Danzo addressed the Kyuubi. Now, give Uzumaki access to your power. All of it. The Kyuubi presented an open palm, above which began to gather a red swirling ball of energy.
Take it,
the Kyuubi said in a monotone voice. Go, Danzo said, and gave her a small push forward. Naruko stopped in front of the presented ball of chakra. The Kyuubi was the strongest of all the Bijou by a very large margin. Naruko had but to reach out, and she'd instantly become one of the single most powerful individuals on the planet. She doubted even the Akatsuki would be able to threaten her. She'd be safe. Naruko began to recall her conversation with the Kyuubi, how he'd always been used as a tool, how he'd rather disappear than ever see the ones who imprisoned him benefit from it. He tried to kill her in the past, true, but when she had approached him at the start, she had only seen him as a means to gain the power to defeat Gaara. Looking back on it with all she now knew, she couldn't blame him for seeing her as an enemy. Naruko turned away from the offered power and ran back to Danzo. Is something wrong, child? Yes, I know enough about genjutsu to know that if somebody helps you out of their own free will, they are always more effective. So if we do this, I'll never reach my full potential. Except you said you couldn't gain his cooperation anyway, Danzo pointed out. I thought I couldn't do it, but I never intended to stop trying. Naruko lied. No matter how small, I want to take the chance to become a truly perfect Jinchuriki, rather than this half measure. Danzo considered her for a long time. Very well, he eventually said. He snapped his fingers and the genjutsu on the Kyuubi got lifted. Rather than attack them, the Kyuubi simply fled to the back of the cage and didn't look at them. Danzo turned to leave and beckoned for her to follow. It was brave but foolish of you to follow me into the cage, but I do appreciate the loyalty you showed by trying to come to my aid, he said. But know that no matter what happens, the Leaf Village needs you to be able to use the Kyuubi's power, and we can't wait forever. You'll have until the end of your training trip with Lord Jiraiya. Then, Danzo offered a few parting words for the Kyuubi. I hope you understand as well. Willing or not, you will serve Konoha's interests. You're too valuable a tool not to use. The next time Naruko blinked, Danzo was gone, and she was alone with the Kyuubi. Naruko stayed there for several minutes, working through in her head what had just happened, and what in the blazes she was supposed to do now. She had just bought time to solve a problem she didn't think could be solved. Naruko was startled out of her thoughts by the sound of dripping water. Naruko looked for the source, and found herself looking at the back of the Kyuubi. He was still facing away from her, but the sounds she was hearing... Kyuubi, are you crying? The moment she uttered those words, the Kyuubi turned around and roared at her. Wind and water rushed at her and she found herself being blown back. Before she knew it, she was back in the real world, sitting in the grass. Danzo was nowhere to be seen. Naruko immediately hugged herself. That roar had been more than just a physical force. It had also contained so much raw emotion that it stabbed right through her like a knife. She could still feel the echoes of it running through her heart. Despair, pain, sorrow, humiliation, and hate. So much hate. Eventually, Naruko found herself looking towards the carved face of her father on the Hokage monument. Papa, why couldn't you just let him be free? Once again, Sasuke, I will remind you that informing me you need more sedatives when I'm treating your injuries doesn't prove how manly you are. Hinata said as she was busy repairing the bones in his arm, and he grunted at the discomfort. Depends on the medic, I guess. For most people here, admitting it would be a sign of weakness. Might as well get used to it. Hinata gave a long-suffering sigh. I will also remind you that broken bones do not, in fact, become stronger after breaking. Be more careful, please. For both our sakes. Sasuke grunted in response. Instead of lecturing me, perhaps you should focus on yourself. There are plenty of competent doctors here. Your time is better spent improving yourself than tending to me. This is improving myself. Books and tests on animals can only bring you so far. I need some real patience. So I am your test dummy? Yes, she said and gave him a mischievous smile. You want me to stop? No. At least with Hinata, Sasuke didn't have to worry about intentionally being harmed. He let her work in silence. It wouldn't do to distract her and have her make his injuries worse. When she was finished, however, he said, You spend too much time with your books. Do I now? I get plenty of practical experience, as I just demonstrated. No, you should be training with me rather than whatever it is that you're doing. I do try to keep informed. Can't argue with that, Sasuke thought as he eyed her up and down. Not as much as you could be. No, but what I do is important too. Not if you're dead. Hinata was about to give another quick response, before giving her words more thought. I don't want to spend my whole life fighting, Sasuke. You may not have a choice. More than you might think. The world is a big place and there are plenty of places to hide and start over. But to do that, it would help if I've got some skills besides just fighting. You think Konoha will ever stop hunting you? Sasuke asked. He knew that Konoha had put a price on both of them. Not to kill them, just for their location so they could be brought back alive. He wondered how long the bring them in alive stance would last. No, they won't. Doesn't mean they'll ever find me. I know you think I should just stand my ground and face my enemies. It's what you do. But that's just inviting more enemies, and that isn't me. A life of constant violence and conflict isn't for me. You are aware that you are a ninja? Do you think that was a choice that I made myself? That surprised him. You didn't want to be a ninja? Even as he asked the question, he figured he shouldn't be surprised. And you could almost predict what she was going to say next. I used to. It was what was expected of me, and I felt like I had something to prove. But not anymore. Hinata must have sensed some of his worry. Don't worry, I won't ditch you to run off, not for a while at least. I didn't say I was worried. You didn't have to, you tsundere you. Hinata said with a small smile as she pinched his cheek. Anyone else in Sasuke would have broken her hand for that offense. So what life do you want? Be a local healer for some backwater village? Sasuke asked. Would that be so bad? Hinata asked. Sasuke didn't answer. I want a life surrounded by friends and family, who can trust me as I can trust them, and a life where I don't need to constantly look over my shoulder for dangers. Anything else is secondary. The family part of it might be difficult if you're just going to run from them, Sasuke pointed out. Hinata suddenly grew still. Not all family is something that is decided for you, she said softly while giving him a meaningful look. You are welcome to come with me. After Sasuke realized what she was implying, he had to take a couple of seconds to get his nerves under control. After spending nearly 3 years together in close proximity, in a situation where they could only completely trust and confide in each other, Sasuke was well aware that Hinata was starting to see him more and more in a romantic light. He couldn't pinpoint when it started exactly, but by now he had picked up on the signals. For his own part, well, Hinata was already the most important person in his life for years now. Combine that with the fact that he had just gone through puberty, and so it was impossible for him not to notice that Hinata was growing into a beautiful woman. In his dreams he'd already deflowered her at least half a dozen times. And considering that he was well aware the interest was mutual, Sasuke knew it wouldn't be hard to turn those dreams into reality. There were two things that stopped him. One was Orochimaru. By now Sasuke had a pretty good read on him, and he could now guess why Orochimaru wanted to keep them in close proximity. The man was obsessed with genetics, and was probably hoping he'd start something with Hinata, possibly knock her up, and so give Orochimaru access to a child with two of Konoha's most powerful bloodlines combined. Not that Sasuke thought he'd ever be so careless with her, but you never know. The idea of playing into Orochimaru's hand like that revolted him. The second reason was that his own future was way too uncertain. There was always a chance that Orochimaru would succeed in taking his body, and if Sasuke dodged that kunai, there was still his confrontation with Itachi. Even after all of his training and preparations, Sasuke still thought his chances of success against his brother weren't good, but that wouldn't stop him from trying. But considering he might die or worse within the next year, starting something with Hinata would simply be irresponsible. And beyond all that, there was the deep-seated fear that if he ever allowed himself to care about someone that deeply, Itachi would simply materialize out of the ether to rip it away from him. One of his most common nightmares, the death of his family at Itachi's hands, had recently started to include Hinata's corpse as well. And if I don't come with you? Sasuke asked after he managed to find his voice again. If his words hurt her, she hid it well, and she simply shrugged. Then I will go on my own, and hopefully eventually find someone else. I don't intend to leave you until your quest is done, but I also won't wait forever. That was actually incredibly reassuring. It was nice to know that Hinata's future happiness wasn't completely reliant on him. Truthfully, I don't really expect much, Hinata continued to say. I know you're far more adventurous than me. Even if you didn't need to kill your brother, you'd still be training, traveling, and finding dangerous and important stuff to do. But again, that ain't me, and I can't ask you to give that up, so just... Hinata's words caught in her throat, and only then did Sasuke realize how hard she must have been preparing herself to say these words. So just think about it, please. And she walked out of his room with all the composure she could muster. Sasuke sighed deeply and lied himself down on his bed. He hoped Hinata's claim that she'd be fine without him wasn't just putting on a brave face. Still, as he lay there, he couldn't help but smile to himself. On the off chance everything worked out for him, if he outsmarted Orochimaru, defeated Itachi, and avoided Konoha, it was nice to think that there was a future waiting for him at the end of it all. And that's the end of part 31. Nikes out.